Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yatha putra cha vitta cha prithanmartya pratiyat pratiyate api atmatvena bhimatad dehade purushas tatha yatha putra cha vitta पृथन्मर्त्य प्रतीयते अपि आत्मा त्वनेभिः अपि आत्मा त्वेनाभिमताद् देहादे पुरुषस्तथा. This is we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 3, Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text 39 and 40 for today. So we'll be reading two verses. So I'm going to be reading the first verse, and then the second verse will go, through the purports, and then we can get started with our discussion. So the synonyms for the first verse: yatha, as; putrat, from a son; putrat, from a son; cha, and; vitat, vittat, from wealth; cha, also; prithak, differently; martya, a mortal man; pratiyate, is understood; api, even; atmatvena, by nature; abhimatat, for which one has affection; deha adhe, deha, deha adhe, from his material body, senses, and mind; purusha, the liberated soul; tatha, similarly. Translation: because of great affection for family and wealth, one accepts a son and some money as his own, and due to affection for the material body, one thinks that it is his. But actually, as one can understand that his family and wealth are different from him, the liberated soul can understand that he and his body are not the same. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The status of real knowledge is explained in this verse. There are many children, but we accept some children as our sons and daughters because of our affection for them, although we know very well that these children are different from us. Similarly, because of great affection for money, we accept some amount of wealth in the bank as ours. In the same way, we claim that the body is ours because of affection for it. I say that it is my body. I then extend the possessive concept and say it is my hand, my leg, and further. And further, it is my bank balance, my son, my daughter. But actually, I know that the son and the money are separate from me. It is the same with the body. I am separate from my body. And it is a question of understanding, and the proper understanding is called pratibuddha. By obtaining knowledge in devotional service or Krishna consciousness, one can become a liberated soul. Text 40. Yatholumukad visphulingad dhoomadvapi swasambhavat api atmatvena bhimatad yathagni pritak ulmukat. Yatha, as; ulmukat, from the flames; visfulingat, from the sparks; dhumat, from the smoke; va, or; api, even; swasambhavat, produced from itself; api, although; atmatvena, by nature; abhimatat, intimately connected; yatha, as; agni, the fire; prithak, different; ulmukat, from the flames. Translation: the blazing fire is different from the flames, from the sparks, and from the smoke, although all are intimately connected because they are born from the same blazing wood. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Although the blazing firewood, the sparks, the smoke, and the flame cannot stay apart because each of them is part and parcel of the fire, still they are different from one another. A less intelligent person accepts the smoke as fire, although fire and smoke are completely different. The heat and light of the fire are separate, although one cannot differentiate fire from heat and light. Perfect. So just going back to text 39. So we're reading just a little background. We're reading from Canto 3, text 28, and sorry, chapter 28, text 39 and 40, right, of the Srimad Bhagavatam, titled Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. So Lord Kapila Dev is continuing to enlighten his mother, Mother Devahuti, about the science of devotional service and the importance of devotional service in our lives. Because this is in response to Mother Devahuti's question to her son, who is the Lord incarnate, Kapila Dev, asking him, how do I free myself from this miserable cycle of birth and death? And so Kapila Dev has been, over the last several texts and chapters, been systematically instructing his mother in the importance of devotional service and how one can be liberated by proper execution of devotional service. So he goes into great detail in terms of what that means. So in this chapter, he is specifically instructing us on the system of yoga. And he says, the system of yoga, the object of which is to concentrate the mind. Practicing this system, one can become joyful and progressively advance towards the path of the absolute truth. And when we're reading these specific texts, right, text 39 and 40, it seems like a total contradiction that on the one hand, we are being told that we should not think of our body as our and or our family or even our wealth as our own. And on the other hand, we're also being told that we must perform our prescribed duties. In fact, Kapila Dev himself starts off this chapter in text 1 and 2, where he's saying, one should perform their prescribed duties to the best of their abilities. He didn't just say one should perform prescribed duties. He's saying one should not only perform their prescribed duties, but also should perform their prescribed duties to the best of their ability. No complacency, no excuses. So, which is it, right? What gives? On the one hand, we're saying we're not this body. Don't treat this wealth as ours. Don't treat this family as ours. On the other hand, we're also being told we have to perform our prescribed duties. And after all, what are we performing our prescribed duties for? To take care of the family, right? So, Srila Prabhupada clearly explains in the purport that one must accept only as much as the Lord gives us. Okay, and even the Nectar of Instruction clearly explains that Atyahara and Prayasascha, right, is not recommended to make progress in spiritual life. In other words, the correct understanding is that we should perform our prescribed duties to take care of our family, right? But we do not over endeavor, right? Pratyahara is definitely not recommended. In other words, we have to draw the lines clearly. as to how much we really need, how much we really need to endeavor to take care of ourselves, our families, but not to cross that line where we're actually getting into over endeavoring, right? And we're all caught up in that, where this is unfortunately the influence of material nature, the environment that we're in, and the current state of life. Everybody is in this constant rat race, constant. When I used to work in downtown Chicago, I used to take the train and I would notice, getting into the train station, even as I'm parking the car, people are not only parking their cars, but they're actually running towards the train, towards the platform, even before the train arrives, in fact. I'm sure, most of you also have seen that. It's a funny scene. I mean, I found it always amusing because I see these people running towards the platform. They're parking the car, closing their doors, and running towards the platform. And once they get onto the platform, they are pushing and pulling, trying to get and squeeze themselves into the train. Fast forward, the day goes on, we're at work, and then I see as soon as, I'm taking the train back to Naperville. I get down from the train, and as I'm getting down from the train, I see people rushing out, literally pushing everybody else aside, getting out of the train, and then running towards their cars. I mean, it's kind of an amusing sight. You're seeing people running to go get onto the train to go to work, and then I see people running, rushing out of the train, coming out from the train and rushing towards their cars at the end of the day. I mean, so we're caught up in this whole mindset. I'm like, why? Why are we doing this? We're constantly pushing ourselves to do more and more and more and more, only to repeat itself the next day and the next day and the next day and the next week and the next month and the next year. And before you know, decades have gone by, being a part of that rat race, and we really have not accomplished much, really. And I can tell you from experience. You can be there, and you can have done that. But at the end of the day, I mean, how much is enough? What is enough? And those are the boundaries that we need to draw. And that is something that does not come from material intelligence. That comes from spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence that we get from spiritual guidance. Spiritual guidance that comes from the spiritual master. So we need to take a pause, reflect on where we've been, where we are today, and where we are headed, and be introspective, basically, and take the guidance from the right sources, from the scriptures, from the spiritual master, and then be able to do something about it, not just receiving that information, but being able to actually apply it in day-to-day life. So that is when we actually see the benefits, right? Otherwise, it is just information coming in and information going out. It kind of makes its way through the space in between the ears, which we call the head. And if it's not doing anything and we don't really do much about it, it's only information that's only coming in and going out. We need to do something about it. That is progress. That is actually making a commitment to move in the right direction. And that is when we can also achieve the detachment that Kapila Dev is talking about. So let's discuss some of these key points from Lord Kapila Dev's discussion with his mother in these two verses for today, starting with affection for the family. Right? He's talking to his mother. I mean, see, ironically, if you look at it, the scene is such. he's talking about detachment. Detachment from what? Detachment from the family. And he's addressing his mother. And Mother Devahuti, on the other hand, if you think about it, she's not saying, no, I want to stay attached, I want to be here. No, she's not. Instead, she's asking her son, how do I get out of this cycle, this repeated cycle of birth and death? So she's talking about detachment as well. That's where her mind is. So it is an interesting and a striking example. It's not just theory where you know Lord Kapiladev, who is the Lord incarnate, giving a discourse or some abstract theory about what detachment is and what and how one can make spiritual progress. He is actually exemplifying it through his actions, and he's giving the right knowledge that can be applied in a practical manner to his mother as well, as we will see not only in this chapter and not only in the previous chapters, but also in the subsequent chapter, where he's driving home this whole message about how one can completely free themselves from this Maya that we live in, the external energy that we're engulfed in on a day to day, on a moment by moment basis as well, by engaging ourselves in true and sincere devotional service. Devotional service that goes beyond the platform of just saying it, doing it for the externality, right? Looking at it from an external perspective. No, it is more internal. Devotional service is a lot more internal. And that's what, again, it's beautiful, so beautiful about Krishna consciousness. It is not a passive take all that information and do nothing about it, but it is an active movement. Srila Prabhupada has given us this beautiful movement, this beautiful practice of Krishna consciousness. It is an active process. And that is what we need to imbibe. We need to constantly remind ourselves that we need to do something about how we relate to Krishna. And that something about is the prescribed devotional services that are given to us in so many different ways and forms, and some resonate more than the others. And Kapiladev in this verse, again, just going back to the verse, Kapiladev is identifying the root cause. The root of all illusion is Maya or Moha, right? That's that delusional affection. And because of ignorance, because of ahankara, because we've forgotten Krishna, because we are we are identifying ourselves so much, or misidentifying ourselves so much with our bodies and our immediate surroundings, our family, our house, our cars, and life and work, and all of this, that we are completely missing the point. We're completely giving in to Maya, right? Or the external energy, which is also the Lord's energy. And after all, Maya is doing her service, and her service is to keep people in illusion, all these living entities like us. So in the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna very clearly says, Prakritire kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashaha. He says that the soul is bewildered by false ego, thinking himself to be the doer. So the illusion is so strong that even though people know that they can't take family or wealth after death, they still cling to them. Right? We all need Pratibuddha, as Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, saying we need the knowledge that helps us understand and differentiate, distinguish, not differentiate, but distinguish our soul from the body. The soul is not the body. right? Instead, the soul transcends the body, right? Or the bodily identity. So the example of family and wealth is easy to understand. One can intellectually grasp that these are not the self, right? We can understand that family and wealth and all of these things are not the soul. In the same way, through a realized discrimination, right? What is realized discrimination? This is Vijnana, right? How we apply, right? How we realize what we're learning, the spiritual knowledge that we're gaining. The soul can see the body as another object, distinct from the self. It's not like the soul has eyes, but what we're saying here is that the soul can recognize through Vijnana, right? That the body and the self are distinctly different. So one should not, even in the Uddhava Gita, and I can read that verse which I came across during my research. It says, Deham Purushvat Buddhva na Janiyad Idam Mama. One should not regard the body as oneself or as one's property, just as a person should not identify with another man's body. So this verse again supports Kapiladev's teaching. So true liberation comes when the false identity is completely broken. One example that comes to mind, and there are many, 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 many examples, but one example that comes to mind is about Jadabharata, right? We all know the story of Jadabharata. He was a phenomenal devotee of the Lord in his past lives, but due to attachment to a deer, he ended up having to take another life before coming back as a human being in the form of Jadabharata and being able to realize that in his past life it was his mistake of misidentifying himself, and having that attachment for the deer ended up causing him the trouble for a lifetime. And so he was able to actually elevate, do something about it. He didn't just recognize and realize, but he actually put that into application. And so he became detached and from material life. In fact, he even tells Rahugana, he as the palanquin bearer of the king, he tells King Rahugana, he says, my body was bitten by dogs and other animals, but I did not protest. I did not protest because I considered the body to be separate from myself. So he's come to that state of realization that even being bitten by an animal, leave alone, an ant or a mosquito or some level of discomfort. But here he is put through so much abuse. He was a king and an elevated devotee in the past life. But all that went downhill because of his attachment. But in this life, out of his realization and the application of that realization, which is an important step for us in our lives, it's not just about the information. And I'm repeating myself here only because this is a lesson for myself as well. I want us to understand that it is not enough to just get information into our heads and keep it in some memory chip in the somewhere in the brain and use it selectively or not even use it for that matter, right? And we keep getting, over the years we've been getting lecture after lecture, discourse after discourse, instruction after instruction. We are engaging ourselves in devotional service, but we need to constantly remember ourselves. So, what are we trying to do here? What is it that we're trying to do here? And so these two verses are very important and they're very interconnected, as well, as we will cover for, in the rest of this um, time slot that we have. So The example of Jadabharata is so important because it tells us that we're not only that he not only that realization itself in itself is not going to take us to where we want to be. We need to apply that vijnana is very, very, very important. We need to apply what we've understood and what we've realized in our devotional service to be able to completely break away from these material attachments. So that's a living example in a sense. So people engage very strongly, with their nationality, with their gender, with their race, with their, economic status, all based on what? Based on body, right? But a liberated soul like Jada Bharat sees through all of these labels and really understands the irrelevance to the eternal self. Okay, so another example in my lifetime, right? So I had the opportunity to work for a company headed by a gentleman named Azim Premji, which some of you may have heard. He's a multi billionaire. But his take on making money, and again, this was a message that he was addressing a group of us leaders, at one point, and he was telling us about how his perspective on making money. It was like, at the end of the day, there's only so much food we can consume. There's only so much food that our stomachs can handle. Similarly, there's only so much food that all of our family can handle as well, right? So his take was any more than that, the body is not going to be able to take. If I can only eat a cup of or a bowl of rice, there's only so much I can have. Anything more than that is going to acid reflux or whatever it is, it's all going to come out. It's not going to stay in there. It's not going to, body's not going to be able to digest it. Similarly, for the family, right? There's only so much that the family can handle. They have their own stomachs. So there's only so much food that can be consumed by the entire family. Similarly, any more money that you can make is excessive. You just need enough money to take care of yourself and your well-being, right? So your being, your well-being, your family's well-being. So he was saying, rest is excessive in that sense. So he not just was speaking those words, but he is also one of the most giving philanthropists in the world, with the likes of, the Bill Gates and, the others who are in hundreds of millions of dollars every year that they give for noble causes. So that is something that we need to, that was a striking example for me, even, through my career. I've come across some very, very good leaders, but this was one thing that resonated so well with me. It really struck home, and I keep telling myself the same thing. It's difficult to practice, obviously, because of the rat race that we are caught up in. And we always have these insecurities about what's going to happen, who's going to take care of me. I do not want to depend on someone else. I do not want to depend on my children, my grandchildren, So basically, these are the kinds of insecurities that come into your head, and we tend to over endeavor. And that lands us in trouble because at the end of the day, end of our life, when you look back, all of these things don't mean much, right? All of these things don't mean much. All this running around excessively. But all hope is not lost, right? So we need to have discriminative spiritual knowledge that helps us pull us out of this material illusion, right? This material illusion is something that just grabs us and keeps us stuck in there, like we were just talking about. But we need something that can pull us out of this. And again, that's the beauty of what Srila Prabhupada has given us. Not just given us, he served it to us on a silver platter. in the form of the Krishna conscious movement. Now, there are hundreds of other sources that can confuse, that can corrupt, they can even contaminate one's understanding about the absolute truth. But then Srila Prabhupada very mercifully just cleared all that clutter away. He just cleared all that clutter away. He just simplified this whole thing and gave us the spiritual knowledge that is not only simple, but also making it easier for us to discriminate. Discriminate in a good sense, right? Please understand the difference. It is discriminating in that it helps us cut through this material illusion and all that is temporary. There's an ongoing tussle, just as a sidebar, there's an ongoing tussle in the British who's who as we speak. There was a multi-billionaire, a young person, who was running a very successful business, the multi-billionaire. He was playing polo and suddenly, he ended up with a heart attack and died on the ground. And now his parents, his current wife, his two ex-wives, their children, his sisters, they're all now fighting for his property, trying to put a claim saying that, hey, we are they're contesting for, a piece of the pie. Here the man has already left. He's left and he's worked so hard and he's built this, financial empire. And when he left, he left. He didn't take not even his own, not only did he not take any of that money, he didn't even get to enjoy it into his 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, whatever his lifespan was going to be. But instead, he died at an early age without enjoying any of that. Not only that, he did not take any of his wealth with him, he did not even take his own body, right? Which he identified so strongly. He ended up with three wives, right? That says something about how strongly he identified or it was attached to his body. Even that he couldn't take. That's on his side. But on the other side, have has the family learned any lessons? No. The family is still associating themselves. This is my money, this is my son's money, or this is my husband's money, and I want a piece of it. This is for me. I want it. Me, 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 me. So, in the grand perspective, we are all fighting over our own happiness, right? At the cost of our relationship with Krishna. Is it not? Right? We're saying, Krishna, yes, I like you, I love you, I want to do things for you, I want to engage in devotional service, but can you please wait? I want to take care of myself, do a little bit, and that little bit is actually almost 24 hours in a day. Then I leave a few minutes to engage, to, talk to Krishna and say, Krishna, thank you. It's very superficial. We tend to get caught up in these kinds of things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all of you are doing that. I'm just making a general statement. The large populace, the world over, we give ourselves the most amount of time for what we want to do. It's our agenda. It's not Krishna's agenda, but it is our agenda that we put ourselves in the center and we are serving ourselves and saying, by the way, Krishna, I can give you some time. I can, spend some time for you. And that needs to change. That equation, that proportion needs to change. So moving along to the next verse, right? So in text 40, again, there is this whole analogy about the fire, the flames, the sparks. But again, they're all distinct, right? While they're also related. And that basically, Kapila Dev is striking an analogy, to how the Supreme Lord is that central element, the source from which all of these distinct entities emanate. The Bhagavan, the Jiva, so Bhagavan being the Supreme Lord, the Jiva being the living entities, and Prakriti, right, the material energy. So the fire in this case represents the Supreme Lord, and the sparks represent the living entities or the Jivas, right, and the smoke represents Prakriti, right, or the material energy, and all are his emanations, right? They're all emanating, they're all coming from him. So let me read, a verse from the Mandaka Upanishad where there is scriptural reference testifying, validating, and confirming this truth. Yathasu diptat pavakad visfulinga sahashaha prabhavante sarupaha तथाक्षरद विविधा सौम्य भावा pragna nivrita pratyashanti sarve. The translation is, as innumerable sparks emanate from a blazing fire, so do all individual souls emanate from the Supreme. Right? So this is basically affirming, the consistency of the Vedanta, right? No matter which source within our bona fide Vedic literature we come across, we read, we're given to read and understand, there is consistency in what is being said. There are no, contradictions there. So while everything originates from the same transcendental source, there are distinct entities, right? Distinct entities that demonstrate the simultaneous oneness and difference. So that leads us to what we've been hearing about Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, the simultaneous oneness and difference, right? Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita says, Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Jivaloke Jiva Buddha Sanatana. Right? It says the living beings in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Right? And we can look at the story of or the journey of Gopakumar in Sanatan Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, where Gopakumar makes his journey in search of something that gives him full satisfaction in terms of trying to figure out what that source is. And he goes from place to place to place to place, from planet to planet to planet, to the higher planets to the highest planets. He meets all of these exalted personalities along the way. And he's inspired, but still he's not done. He feels like there's something is missing, something is missing, something is missing. So even though he is coaxed, he is attracted by all of these various exalted personalities to stay back and be with them in their places, he keeps moving till he finally meets Krishna. And he realizes, he recognizes that my satisfaction is completely dependent on my connection, my relationship with Krishna. So this basically drives home the point, even in this verse, as to how irrelevant these distinct entities like the smoke, like the sparks, all of these don't mean anything if there is no blazing firewood from which they're coming. There has to be that connection. That connection has to be there. So as long as that connection is there, it's just like, I remember, one of my god brothers mentioning many, many years ago about the leaf on a tree. The leaf is connected to the branch, which is connected to the tree, which is connected to the roots. The moment the leaf breaks away from the branch, it is breaking away from the essential root, right? So there is no nourishment coming to the leaf. It just flies away, drifts away, and finally it dries out, withers away, and dies, right? It crumbles back into the earth. So that is what we're talking about here. This is what Kapila is saying, it is totally irrelevant if we don't have that relationship with Krishna. We are separate identities, yes, but as long as we are connected to the supreme identity from, our supreme source from which we all are coming from, there is no point if we break away from that relationship. That relationship has to be there in place for us to be nourished so that our souls can continue to make the spiritual progress and stay in complete perfection, or being able to enjoy the true happiness. That is true happiness, and that is through the satisfaction one gets by being connected with the Supreme Lord. That connection has to be there. And that connection, Kapila Dev is saying, is through devotional service. I mean, see how beautifully all of this is coming together. So it is not just theory, it is not just, you know, a hodgepodge of ideas that sound good, but there is an essence that we all can take away and apply in our practical lives. It doesn't matter who we are, where we are, in our life, in the stages of our life, in the stages of our careers, stages in our family life. It doesn't matter. These are applicable throughout, from stage one through stage N, right? So again, this verse is basically exemplifying how a spark has meaning only when it connects with the fire. And the fire in this case is the Supreme Lord. And one other thing that I'd like for us to also remember is that in this text, the smoke refers to the material energy, right? Or the material nature, which also is an external energy of the Lord, right? But it covers the vision as opposed to illuminate, right? So this reflects Maya originating from the Lord, but in service to the Lord, right? Serving to bewildered, the conditioned souls. That's the function of Maya, and she's doing a phenomenal job. Now, we being jivas, we are completely overwhelmed by Maya if we don't engage ourselves in devotional service. That's why Prabhupada has given us this program of just staying focused in everything that we do it with that mindset, being engaged in devotional service so that we can remember Krishna. When we remember Krishna and we open our hearts to Krishna and say, Krishna, this is too much for me. I cannot handle Maya's external energy. After all, I'm an insignificant speck of a soul. How can I deal with your external energy, which is all pervading in this material world? Padam padam ve padam, right? We are in danger, constantly in danger. So there's never a moment. It is said that every 1/20th of a second also Maya can get us. So we need to open our hearts. We cannot fight this battle with Maya by ourselves. And we cannot stay in dormancy either, right? The soul is active, the body is active. We're constantly, surrounded by the modes. So we're active, we're doing things, we're performing actions. And with those actions, we are also, unfortunately, we are also accumulating a lot of karma, right? So the karmic reactions are bound to take place unless we engage ourselves in devotional service. So the simplicity of what Kapila Dev is talking about is, in just by engaging in devotional service, one can transcend all of this mess that we are completely engulfed in. And for the innocent bystander who's looking at us. We're still doing the same things that he is or she is. But the consciousness is different. And that's what Srila Prabhupada has been, giving to us so nicely. Every place that we go to, there is an ISKCON temple or some form of sadhu sangha. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty because he's given this to us, and the such wonderful devotees who are giving it to us day in and day out, making these wonderful sacrifices day in and day out, traveling to the far reaches of the world, to China, to Russia, to this place and that place, everywhere, right? Just to give this knowledge to us, and through this knowledge, how it can be applied practically, not just giving us the knowledge, but how it can be applied practically and giving us every ounce of their blood, sweat, and tears in service to Krishna, right? So that we can constantly be saturated, as Prabhupada says, in remembering Krishna, in that consciousness of who Krishna is and what our relationship with Krishna is. So, in summary, just getting a collective perspective here, I just want to summarize here. I know we're getting close to the end of the session here, and thank you for bearing with me. So, looking at text 39, and then we'll cover text 40 as well, and just as a summary and a takeaway here. So, the main focus for 39, for text 39, is that we need to discriminate ourself from the body, the self being the soul, and being able to discriminate ourselves from the body, the possessions and family, that goes with the body, right? So that's the self-realization through detachment. So attached detachment, right? So it's not like Krishna is saying throw away your prescribed duties, but he's saying perform your prescribed duties with the understanding of what you're trying to do here. So it has to be a sense of detachment while being attached as well. Now, what is the obstacle that we're facing? We have this whole false ego, me, I, me, mine, right? And this misidentification of ourselves with this body of ours. And what is Kapila Dev saying? Simply put, he's saying we need to have discriminative knowledge and detachment. If we are able to discriminate between the body and self, what is external and what is really internal in terms of our soul, then we can actually start to do something about it. And we spoke about Jada as an example, right? How his attachment, and that's like a living example. It's a striking example. He was a phenomenal, he was an exalted devotee of the Lord, even as a king. He had all the material possessions, but he was detached until he saw the deer. He got attached to the deer, and out of compassion for the deer and being overly affectionate, he ended up losing his life thinking and taking care of that little deer. Finally, having ended up not going back to Krishna, but coming back in another life, spending that entire life, and then giving up that life to come back as Jada. And then through the realization, he was able to go back to Krishna. So, what is the takeaway from from this specific verse, text 39, is that we are not this body, and we say this, but we need to actually internalize that. That in itself can be a challenge, and practice in Krishna consciousness, practice in devotional service, practice in interacting with other Vaishnavas. It's not easy dealing with other Vaishnavas as well. Why? Because they're also living entities, they're also carrying baggage, they're also on a spiritual journey, they're also on different stages of their journey. So, things don't always go and gel well together all the time. So we need to recognize that. We need to step aside. We need to step out of our bodies, almost like an out of body experience, right? We need to step outside of our bodies to be able to say, hey, let me hit that pause button. Yeah, this interaction is not going well. I'm getting insulted or I'm getting offended. But it is the body that is taking this offense, not the self. It's not the soul. Because as souls, we are all connected to Krishna, and the souls are all pure, right? Because they're emanating from Krishna. It is this material body, this material illusion, and this material energy, the modes that the soul is engulfed in, is why the smoke that is covering it is causing that lack of visibility. So we're constantly in the middle of all of this mess, the cloud that we carry, that we're not able to see through that. So text 40, let's talk about that. The focus of text 40 is about the relationship between the jiva and the Supreme Lord, right? It's the simultaneous oneness and difference that we spoke about. So, what is the misunderstanding here? What is the challenge here? The challenge is that we're confusing. We really don't understand the difference between unity and duality, right? It's almost like it has to be one or the other. The mind is not able to comprehend and put it together in a way that it can actually accept the fact that there can be a simultaneous oneness and difference. Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, right? How does that happen? So how can we get over that is really, you know, gaining being able to invest in the knowledge that is given to us in terms of how we can engage in devotional service. So through that engagement of devotional service, we can understand who we are, who the Lord is, who we are, and what our relationship is with the Lord. Right? We took several examples there, including examples of Gopakumar. Powerful example, right? The whole Brihad Bhagavatamrita is so beautifully written. I mean, it's just wonderful when you read that. If you get a chance to read it, please do. It's about how, Gopakumar's experiences as he goes from place to place to place, looking. See, he's earnestly, sincerely looking for that satisfaction of being with Krishna, that pleasure of being with Krishna. But he doesn't realize that initially, and he goes through all of these extreme, situations that finally bring him back to Krishna, and then he realizes that's where the true satisfaction, complete satisfaction is. Suprasiddhiti, right? So that is, something that we can take away from Gopkumar's example. So the takeaway from that particular verse is about we are all parts and parcels of Krishna. So the whole example of in the text, which is about the sparks and the flames and all of the smoke and all of that, is saying that although we are distinct entities, we are connected to Krishna, but we are all parts and parcels of Krishna, right? We are not something separate that was created just like that, came out of nothing. No, there is a source. We all have a source. Our eternal source and the absolute source is the Supreme Lord, Krishna. So knowledge and detachment can help us get out of this vicious cycle, right, that we are in this material world. And by getting rid of that, I mean, through that knowledge, we can get rid of our false ego, that is the bodily misconception. And as we continue to engage ourselves in devotional service, we can better accept the fact of Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, right? That the philosophy that's given to us so beautifully and practically. And that is the way that we can actually break free from this cycle. So I hope I didn't overly confuse you. Hope something stuck with you. And let's see if there is any discussion. Else, I wish you all a very happy Krishna conscious week ahead. Stay engaged in devotional service, and always remember Krishna. Never forget Krishna in everything that you do. Thank you again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. So very beautiful class. Each and every word that you are saying is touching my deep heart, like the running around and all these incidents that are happening around us, and how the detachment we have to take place, and all the insight that you gave. It is so precious. Actually, that's what I can say. Thank you, Prabhuji. It is a very wonderful class.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much. This is
Yeah.
I take this very seriously, very personally as well, because this is purification for me as well, because we're
Mm-hmm.
all in it together.
Yeah.
So I have a long ways to go. So please pray for me.
Definitely, Prabhu, because this is a very good example what you said about that person who died of a heart attack at a very young age, and all the family is still fighting for his property. So that's happening everywhere. Even the if even the parents are alive, right? Still kids are fighting for the property. The families, not after the death. Even they are alive, they are still fighting. And when can they get, and what can they get, and in the same family. Detachment is mainly coming out of these material things, not only the family and anything from outside the body. Looking inwards is more. When you said the example of the train, it was so funny, Prabhuji, how we catch the train and how we get off the train. We see that every day. As you said, that is the rat race that we are doing. And yeah, years are passing, decades are passing. We can't learn any lesson from these things. That is very, uh, that means we have to do some progress. As you said, we are hearing from one ear and listening from the other way. There is a mind to think and actually do some process and get some advantage, get some benefit. Even they say like thought of the day, or some one step at a time is also very precious. And these classes help me a lot, mainly when I listen in the morning time. It's so good, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you for taking the time and being part of this session. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. If there's nothing else, then we can close for today. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.